Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. This is a bonus episode of the second Digital Government Excellence Symposium brought to you by PAYIT. I'm Nadia Davis. I'm the founder and executive producer of this event, and I'm excited to have you on today's show. For those of you who are new to the event, let me remind you that the main event that consisted of 6 episodes ran earlier this year, and it focused on various most pertinent topics within digital government modernization and transformation. If you're curious about those episodes, you can access them on demand on the right-hand side of your screen in the handout section, and you get to explore all the topics from championing transformation to collecting revenue faster that focus on best practices from the thought leaders across the country on delivering digital government services to the residents better. Well, today's episode is centered around the topic that has been front and center in our lives, whether in the public sector or the private sector, the topic of AI. We briefly touched upon the topic in the main event that concluded earlier this year. However, many of you reached out and you said that you wanted to know more. You wanted more of a deep dive. So today, that's what we're going to do with today's episode on whether governments are ready for AI or whether AI is ready for local governments. And with this, Austin, it's over to you.
Thanks, Nadia, and welcome everyone joining us online today. This is a bonus episode of the Digital Government Excellence Symposium for 2024, and we're excited to dig into the hot topic of the time, and that's AI, and specifically talking about its intersection with local government. And we want to confront some of these questions that all of us are facing around kind of readiness for our teams in using some of these AI tools to either drive internal efficiency or a better resident experience, and also confront some of the questions of readiness for AI and local government and how we manage or maintain public trust and transparency as we adopt some of these tools moving forward. So to quickly introduce myself, my name is Austin Walkett. I'm the head of state and local products here at PAYIT, and I work on our product management team delivering solutions to market around at the state and local level around property tax courts, utilities, and then at the DMV or income tax level in that market. I'm excited to be joined today by Jonathan Feldman and Amelia Powers-Gardner. Jonathan joins us from Wake County, North Carolina, and Amelia is the Commissioner of Utah County, Utah. Welcome to both of you. Could I quickly ask you to introduce yourself? Amelia, if you want to go first.
Yeah, as you said, my name is Amelia Powers-Gardner. I'm a county commissioner in Utah County, Utah. And prior to that, I served as the county clerk and auditor. And prior to that, I spent 12 years working at Caterpillar. I have an engineering and manufacturing background. And am a huge advocate of disruptive technology in government. It's actually kind of why I got into government service, was because I wanted government to better serve people. And I think technology is a great aspect on how we can do that.
Great. It's great to have you with us. Jonathan?
Jonathan Feldman. I'm CIO of Wake County. Delighted to share the stage with Commissioner Powers-Gardner and yourself. And I've been in IT longer than I want to tell you. And I've done just about every job in IT, from developer. We used to call that programmer, and which probably reveals my age a little bit. And I, similarly to the commissioner, I got into both technology and government because I believe both those things can serve people better.
Yeah, and we agree. So I'm excited to have both of you with us and looking forward to the discussion today. So to set the table a little bit, we're gonna take this conversation kind of in 3 parts. So we'll talk about the current state. You know, I think there's both in Utah County and Wake County, there's some exciting use cases that you all are already digging into that we can certainly touch on and hear more about. And talk about kind of how we're confronting this topic of AI and what it means for the future of work, for government, for resident experience, and so forth. So I think really it kind of boils down to these three main categories. So we're seeing kind of some targeted investment, maybe some experimentation with some of these tools in the market today, where starting to use AI just in some back office functions, maybe to drive some efficiency around certain things, certain repeatable functions, that type of thing. A lot of it aimed towards efficiency of maybe internal process. So how do we maximize the workforce that we have available to us and their potential, that type of thing. And I think there's a lot of excitement around future opportunities. So the opportunities obviously to improve the resident experience, maybe further automation of some of the services that we provide today, and probably more that you all might be able to share with us today. So maybe to start the discussion, I'd like to hear a little bit about some of the use cases that you have going forward today. Amelia, there was an example, I think, in Utah County around emergency management and some of the new tools that you all delivered to improve that experience, both for responders as well as the citizens. You could maybe talk to us more about that use case or any others that you have going on in the county today.
Yeah, we actually have an AI committee. We have an AI working group that has folks from across the spectrum in our county. So we have a lot of projects going on right now. Some of them are customer facing or citizen facing, like an emergency management system that allows chat bots and allows people to enter things into that system, all the way through to some machine learning that is allowing our employees to become more efficient and effective. And even from the area of the assessor's office, utilizing AI to analyze increases in property values and make sure that there aren't outliers. And if there are outliers, looking at that to see, did they do some construction on that property? And so it's almost double checking, as well as utilizing AI to protect people's data internally to ensure that a human error doesn't accidentally release someone's PII. So we actually have several projects ongoing right now beyond even just a few months ago when we started working with an AI group.
That's great. Yeah, that's great to hear. I think maybe a follow-up question, as you start to enable staff or other folks that are using some of these tools, maybe you could talk a little bit about enablement and kind of having those human in the loop examples where you're speeding up that repeatable process or that type of thing. Maybe you could talk about kind of the process to get staff enabled or excited about that, and how it's going with those kind of human in the loop scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to point out that when we talk about AI, there's several different types of AI, right? We've got generative AI. I personally use generative AI quite a bit when writing speeches. I have a thread that I have loaded dozens of speeches that I've given into this AI so we can kind of learn my vernacular and how I speak. And I will ask it to write me speeches and have taken the amount of time that it takes me to draft a speech down significantly using that. That's a generative AI. But then there's also machine learning. And this is where we're kind of using this in back office areas and utilizing machine learning to improve processes. This would be the assessor's office would be one of those examples where we're using this to catch anomalies and see changes and developments. The auditor's office can also use this in finance and budget analysis. As people send us their budget requests for next year, and we're looking at increases, we can say, hey, highlight any budget line item that has an increase higher than 5% so that we can hone in on those. And instead of having to look at thousands of line items for an entire county, this gives us the ability to analyze any of the ones that are just outside of the normal. But then also utilizing it to detect PII. And if someone is entering PII into a system that they shouldn't be, because maybe it's an open source system, us having the ability to hone in on that. So what we've done at the county is we've come up with a policy, and that policy says we want you to use AI because it makes things more efficient and effective. However, we want you to treat that AI like a freshman intern. We have to recognize recognize that there's bias, and you need to double check everything you create using generative AI for bias and ensure that we're doing justice there. On top of that, you have to have you have to have training, and then anything you utilize AI for, you are personally liable for. You can't just blame AI for a mistake that was made. So double check everything, check it for bias, check it for hallucinations. And then we have to, of course, in order to do that, you have to know what those are. So we have a policy that says if you're going to use AI, that's fantastic. Just make sure you've taken the training and understand what your responsibilities as an employee are in the use of that AI.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you touched on how broad the spectrum of value that we can derive from these types of tools. I think this is true in the private sector as well, where, a lot of the hype is around, okay, let's build an app. We'll call it .ai, and it has, this consumer-facing AI functionality. But, if you peel back the layers, there's so much opportunity in other parts of how we do work, or driving efficiency in other areas. So, and how we derive value. The other thing I think that's interesting too is, the kind of expectation setting that you talked about around it's not going to deliver 100% accuracy by itself, but the ability to get 75% of the way there on having your speech written, and then some cleanup maybe that you do by yourself. There's still value there, right? So that's great to hear. Jonathan, maybe we could shift the question over to you. There was an example, I think, in Wake County about the vital records and some of the tooling that you put there to surface some of those. Maybe you could talk about that one or other use cases you guys are confronting.
Let me drop back a little bit, because I really thought Commissioner Powers-Gardner brought up a great point, which I'm paraphrasing. It's that of the basics, right?
Yeah.
And, when we began this journey, we knew that it wasn't just going to be IT saying thou shalt, right? It was going to be, and it wasn't going to be, we're just going to pick an app and add a .ai next to it. Like I think others did, we work with various companies that already are using AI, right? For instance, for our tax records, very much like the commissioner spoke about, we used AI to proof the work that the tax office was doing, but we didn't go with tax.ai, right? Because that would not have the kind of credibility that we're looking for when we're looking at tax records of 1.2 million people. Instead, we went with an established vendor that had a foray, that was our data vendor, right? And they went into AI, and we felt comfortable with them because they're an established organization, and they were able to use the technology to vet, and our tax administrator said this was the best revaluation we've ever done, bar none. So that's the kind of quiet use case that you see. We also did a roadshow around the county because we understand that IT is not creating every use case that's out there, and that we really need to all be responsible about this thing. We don't want to turn into a Samsung where someone puts records into AI and all of a sudden they're distributed, or there's sort of a data leak in that way. So not to go too much into that, but that education opportunity and that roadshow and that invitation to folks that this is for everybody. It's not just for IT. Yes, there's great risk, but I actually created a graphic of an ostrich, with its head in the sand and robots running around, right, with generative AI. And in my slide deck for these folks, I said, we can't just take gigantic risks with AI, but we also are not going to put our heads in the sand, because that's a decision too. And if you decide not to learn anything, what that means is by the time AI becomes required, which it wasn't then, we won't know anything about it because we won't have done any work with it and we won't have any experience with it. So it was a mandate for us to begin the AI journey with publicly available data, right? Where we're not putting PII at risk. We're not putting confidential records at risk. And so to your land records or to your Register of Deeds example, one of our early adopters was our Register of Deeds, who is a very progressive person and had a project that really lent itself to using AI tools. There are two projects. One is called the Enslaved Persons Project, which aims to provide transparency to the truth that there were enslaved people here in the US, and to also provide genealogists with a way to trace that ancestry in those records. The problem with that, and the other project that I'll mention in a moment, was that, of course, records began way before people were using either dot matrix printers or typewriters to produce records. They were using handwriting. And as anyone who has tried to scan and OCR handwriting can attest to, it's a really tough problem. But now enter AI, and you can teach AI how to read that writing with tremendous accuracy. Of course, we had a human in the loop, but that is so much faster, having someone proof something rather than transcribe something. We have another project called the Restrictive Racial Covenants in terms of deeds. It's a shameful part of this country that if you were an African American, a person of color, you could not buy certain properties. And so, again, transparency was the goal. And many of those records, even though there were all these folks who were willing to transcribe the typed records, the ones that were written in handwriting of the 1800s and before were very, very difficult, even for volunteers to do. But you can teach AI to do that very, very quickly. And so we're really proud of that project.
Oh, that's great. I love that both of you, lead with the use case. I think that, in the hype cycle of a new or kind of emerging technology, a lot of times it can turn into kind of a solution without a problem, if that makes sense. So finding, the use cases where you can point some of these new tools to speed up the process or to deliver new value, I think is really interesting. One of the things, we talked about kind of the constraints around maintaining public trust, how we use data, PII, that type of thing. I'm curious if there's any constraints or other externalities that you're managing, whether it's cost or some of the things that can run rampant if there's kind of unbounded use of some of these new tools. So Amelia, maybe I'll hand it to you first, if you could speak maybe to how you're managing some of those externalities that might be a little bit more specific to local government.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, how much time do we have? There's a list. The first would be cost. Cost is a huge one, right? Local governments don't have an endless supply of money, and every dollar that we spend comes from a taxpayer citizen. And so we need to make sure that we're utilizing those dollars efficiently and effectively. So money is one of our biggest issues. Beyond that, we also have adoption. We have the employees that we've been working with for years, many of whom have been working with government for a decade or more, and they are resistant to change in general, but then change that includes technology. It's a process. You really have to teach them that this will make things better. This will make things easier. This will make things more efficient. And there's definitely a learning curve there and getting their buy-in to implementation. We also have antiquated systems. I've got a system that I'm trying to implement an AI solution in right now that is an application that requires handwriting, right? There's documents that have to be released. Right now it's handwriting. It's an entirely manual process. And the way that I'm working with that crowd, the employees there that do that process is they've got some openings, and it's getting harder and harder to hire replacement workers when someone retires. And so I'm having to work with them to help them see that this process that they have done this way for almost 2 decades, we can stay within the bounds of what you're used to, but just make you more efficient. So there's one aspect of it. And then the other one is getting buy-in from your citizens. There is some fear around AI, the open source. It is a real concern. Some of it is, using AI to submit applications is not going to cause robots to rise up and conquer the human race. So some of these are kind of outlandish concerns, but some of them are reasonable concerns. You look at the Samsung example. People have options. They can buy a Motorola, they can buy an Apple, they can buy a Samsung. They chose Samsung. Samsung made some mistakes and caused issues, but you don't have a choice when you come to a government, right? If you're getting a birth certificate or a death certificate or, a tax abatement, you don't have a choice but to come to government. And therefore we have a higher obligation to protect your data. So those are really the big ones, I would say. Technology, adoption from employees, and acceptance by the general public.
Great. Any thoughts from you on that question? Kind of additional constraints or externalities to manage?
Irrational exuberance comes to mind. The commissioner mentioned a lot of good ones, but when we considered very early doing a chatbot, and we decided no. Because as it turns out, generative AI lies and makes things up. Now, another local government that was very large and very public decided, hey, let's do a chatbot. And even when there were several news articles about it telling people the wrong thing and telling people to do illegal things, they still wouldn't take it down. And that's what I mean by irrational exuberance. This stuff, of course, it's changed the world. We already know that. But to just be starry-eyed about it and want to use it no matter, and not acknowledge that it has significant serious limitations, of course you're going to run into problems. Now, there are better ways to do a chatbot nowadays, right? RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, comes to mind. And we are potentially going to release a chatbot. I can talk a little bit more about that if you like. But, in the early days, it was just bonkers to release a chatbot. And so... but there's so much pressure, right? People want to be seen as first. They want to be seen as innovators. My opinion, I want to be seen as useful, right? We have an obligation to residents, and it's not, the commissioner said it really well about tax dollars, but I'm also interested in where do we spend our efforts, and are we being responsible? Or are we being reckless and crazy? I would rather not be reckless and crazy. I love doing new stuff. Don't get me wrong. But when we were going to the cloud in 2012 or 2011, my staff thought, oh, this is reckless and crazy. And you have to slow down. You have to say, why is this reckless and crazy? Let's do some tests. Is this demonstrably reckless and crazy? And if folks would have slowed, and in the case of cloud, it was not reckless and crazy. But in the case of early generative AI, it was demonstrably reckless and crazy, right? Everyone heard about that lawyer who, submitted a case and got censured by the court because it was all made up. No one wants to do that for at least I don't want to do that to my residents.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate all of those thoughts. So I think that may be a good segue actually to some research that we conducted over the course of the summer this year, and really kind of puts a finer point on what you both have shared in terms of this focuses in specifically on residents and kind of the general public. And it's really a mixed bag, right? There's excitement around the new technology, but there's also, a certain level of uncertainty when it comes to, especially when you intersect AI and government. I think there's maybe some pause around how do we move forward safely. So a couple of questions, maybe kind of specifically as it relates to the general public. I think you guys have both brought up examples where, we focus on the use case and kind of solving a problem better and not necessarily leading with AI or machine learning or the tool itself. But I'm curious, in your conversations with the public, some of the education campaigns you've gone through, what are you hearing from the street? We also have the benefit of being residents ourselves too, so we get to live in the places that we work as well. So I'm curious kind of what you're hearing in those interactions in terms of their willingness to move forward here. Amelia, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm finding that your survey is very much like what I'm finding. It's very much a mixed bag. Utah County is one of the youngest counties in the country. Our average age is 23. So I have a large portion of my population that are millennials or Gen Z that really trust technology. They have grown up their entire lives with technology and the internet, and they trust it. They live their lives online, and they don't want to have to walk into a government building. And so they know there's risk, but they don't care. They want that convenience. On the flip side, my largest voter base is over the age of 59. And so I have a large group of constituents that they don't want anything online. An iPhone scares them, and they want to drive their car down and park at the government building. So walking this line, what I try to do is, as we implement a lot of these technologies, we give choice, right? Very rarely will you ever see my county implement a technology that is 100% across the board. In 2019, I launched a beta and went live in 2020 for an online marriage license system where you never have to step foot in a government building to get your marriage license, and you can do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with an internet signal and a webcam. And I have a portion of my population, we charge an additional like $20 for that. They are more than happy to pay $20 to not have to take a day off work, drive down, park their car, and come into a government building. But we still have a brick and mortar office that is there that anyone who wants to come into that building can walk in off the street and get their marriage license. AI adoption is like that. If people want to be able to get services in the middle of the night, they want to use an online system, an AI technology to do that, we can provide that, but we still have a brick and mortar building. That's a little bit problematic when it comes to implementation, but if that's how we best serve our citizens, I tell my older constituents, every person under the age of 40 that isn't standing in line in front of you because they preferred to use the online option just makes your line that much shorter.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Jonathan, any thoughts on kind of resident sentiment here?
No, I think it's a mixed bag. I think like the commissioner, I think this is the way the world works right now. You've got folks in tech who are full speed ahead. You've got folks who see the promise and see the risks, who say yes for some things. And then you see, frankly, you see the people who have been laid off and replaced by a small outsourcing contract and AI. And this has demonstrably happened in many industries across the country, in small pockets here and there. And they're thinking AI is great for what? So I think it is a very mixed bag. I think that what the commissioner is talking about in terms of equity of access is a big deal. It's still not 100%. It's not close to 100% that folks have a digital device, good enough broadband, and the knowledge and skills to use those things, right? So if we go entirely, hey, you've got to do AI this, online this, we're losing people. And so I think in government particularly, and well said about, we are a monopoly, right? You can't get certain things anywhere else. So we have to be particularly careful. There's a new book out called The Friction Project, and it talks about bureaucracy and making things harder or easier, right? And government is bureaucracy, it's friction, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. But the thing I want to just focus on is that sometimes it's good for something to take a little bit longer. And I'm not going to judge what should take longer and what should go slower. But I think you can imagine to yourself that certain things should not be very fast, right? Different states, for example, have different laws about how fast can you get a divorce. And I'm not a policymaker, right? So I'm not going to say where I land on that. But my point is that not everything should be fast. And when we turn everything over to the robots and say everything should be fast, we're missing the point. As human beings, there are some things that we have chosen that should be slower, and some things that we have chosen that should be faster. And to take a one size fits all, we're going to make everything fast and processed by AI because surveillance capitalism has told us to do that, is to lose our essential humanity.
Great. Well, thank you for those thoughts. I think, to understand kind of future state, I think I wouldn't be the product person from a software company if we didn't riff on the future a little bit. So let's maybe shift gears from kind of constraints or guardrails and maybe think about like what excites us about some of the opportunities that are on the horizon. I think in the discussion today, we recognize there's, control that has to exist and kind of how we manage these things carefully. But let's spend a little bit of time on what's exciting you guys about the future. We're understanding where you are today, and then potential opportunities or use cases that are out there.
Listen, I am wildly enthusiastic about AI cutting wait times for government services. Right? Yeah. That's something that we don't want to be slowed down. Right? So when chatbots get good enough, So I've got someone working on a use case for our Unified Development Ordinance. It's this thick, right? And finding out what is permitted in your zoning is sometimes really hard. It takes a PhD in UDO. But in the same way that the U.S. Navy is using AI to get answers from the rules of war, which are also gigantic, right? We hope to be able to give developers and folks who are trying to really economically develop our community, we're hoping to give them faster answers and accurate answers, right? And retrieval augmented generation, embedding, those are technologies that enhance Gen AI and give us a fighting chance of releasing an AI and a chatbot that can give these folks fast answers, but also give them accurate answers that we're comfortable with. So more to come on that.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that sounds like a very exciting project. I always try to tell people that what do I focus on in government? I try to make things better, faster, cheaper. Mm-hmm. And what you're describing absolutely can do that. Mm-hmm. They don't have to hire a lawyer at that point, or they do, they're spending less hours. That lawyer is spending less hours, right? So that's going to be cheaper. That helps everybody. Faster right? They don't have to wait for an employee to have time to go through everything. And being accurate. We've done something similar, but it's more internal, where we have, internal policies and procedures, and utilizing an AI to skim those policies and procedures so that a new supervisor can type in bereavement, and then they can get all of the different bereavement policies so that they can accurately tell an employee without an employee going through a crisis. Obviously, it's bereavement. They've had somebody that is close to them pass away, and they're going through a crisis. They don't have to wait a day and a half for their boss to have time to call HR and to ask how much time off they have. They can do that right there for internal policies and procedures and look that up. So there's definitely ways that we can do that. You're absolutely right that we don't want government services to take longer, to make them shorter. The other part of this, though, that is very exciting for government is that it levels the playing field for a lot of disadvantaged populations. So there are some people that don't have access to broadband, but there are also people that do have access to broadband and can use an electronic device. And some of those people are blind or are deaf or have mobility constraints. They may have, anxiety and mental health concerns, or they could be a single mom who works a second shift. And those individuals can get access to government services significantly more easily. And this is really us serving those citizens in a way that best serves them. That's one of the things I'm most excited about.
Oh, that's excellent. I think I love that you both touched on kind of navigating the experience of interacting with government, not just is the service available in, a number of channels, whether that's the digital or the analog. I think the residents that we talk to, even about hesitance moving to a digital alternative, some of that is just the kind of confidence that comes with talking to somebody at the counter that knows what to do. So, I think some of the opportunity with kind of a trusted digital version of that type of experience and help with navigating the experience, not just delivering the service, is a really exciting frontier. Well, I think we can leave it there for today's discussion. I want to thank you both, Amelia and Jonathan, for the time today and the discussion. I think the audience will find the discussion really helpful in terms of hearing directly how you all are confronting some of these new tools, emerging technology, and some of the excitement about how we move forward safely. So thank you both for the time, and great to have you with us.